Welcome to Longevity Advantage. I'm your host, Scott Fulton. Good to be with you again today. My curiosity around longevity goes way back to my childhood when I thought 60 was ancient. Well, thankfully I don't think that anymore, and I'm guessing you don't either. I teach lifelong learners at the University of Delaware, and with the help of some colleagues around the country, we put together a really unique course in our classroom, and we're really excited to tell you that we're bringing that up online later this year. Meantime, there's this and a number of videos that are going to follow. I'm honored that you chose to spend a few minutes with me here today. So let's take a look at the foundations of longevity and what are the opportunities that you can start to leverage in your life. I'm not much of a gambler, but I know enough about the game to know that the better I understand the rules, the better I understand the odds, the more likely I'm going to have successful outcomes. And in context of longevity, that means I'm going to be able to influence my life expectancy and also be able to influence the number of healthy years that I have in front of me. And so when we think about life, it's really around managing the odds and understanding them well enough to make informed choices as we go forward. The odds are definitely changing and unfortunately not in our favor. So if we're looking to get the most out of our golden years, it's well worth spending some time to understand longevity at a little deeper level. So let's take this example. This is actuarial data, so don't get confused that it's not life expectancy data, but it follows the same trends. And if we look at men and women, for example, and 50% survival rate, for older adults, that would say for men it's around 80, and for women it's around 85. So that's the 50%. Well, those folks don't know any more than anybody else on the street. That's the average number. Well, what if I learned something about longevity to be able to influence my odds? Could I get to the top 25%? Well, for a woman, that means you could add another 7 to 12 healthy years, not just years, but healthy years onto your retirement years. And for a man, about another 8 to 13. My students quickly realize getting to the top 25% really isn't that challenging. Maybe they can make it to the top 10%. And when we start to add 12 to perhaps 20 years onto our retirement years, now suddenly retirement looks not just longer, maybe 50% longer, maybe twice as long as it was originally. It's a pretty significant number when we stop and think about it. So what would we want to learn to be able to improve our odds? This is the Healthspan opportunity curve. This is the one we'd all sign up for in a heartbeat if we could. We maintain a high standard of living, maintain our health, we stay active and engaged with friends and family, we save a lot of money that otherwise might have been spent on health care, and we have a really compressed morbidity. So the scenario here is we live to 100, we have a nice dinner with our family and friends, we go up to bed, turn out the light, and we pass away in our sleep. Who wouldn't sign up for that if they could? Unfortunately, this is what the curve looks like for most of the population. We don't see a big difference at age 50, but that small separation starts to widen once we see the first medical event. We'd like to think we could get back up on that green curve, but in reality, it's a much taller climb than most appreciate. And so we start this downward trend of medical treatments and pharmaceuticals. I only have to look at my father as a great example of this. At age 55, first heart attack and bypass surgery, followed by a second one, followed by a round of prostate cancer, followed by another round of prostate cancer, until finally dying of bladder disease. He spent 100% of his retirement years in medical treatment, recovering from medical treatment, or under doctor's care. And while he battled back like a trooper every time, he would be the first to tell you, had he known what we could know now, he could have avoided most, if not all, of the events that he ran into. He may not have lived any longer, but he certainly would have had a much more enjoyable retirement. I'd like to think that my father's example was unique, but unfortunately it's all too common. We're seeing more and more people disappear off the radar once they start to get into the serious healthcare treatment, and so they become isolated from our daily view, and so we tend to forget that those people are out there. But unfortunately those numbers are growing more each day. So our goal is really, how do we get up on that green curve? How do we identify what that looks like? And then so how do we maintain that for as long as we can? The other thing I'd point to on this curve is all the medical events. The role of modern medicine is to keep us from dying, and they are doing a fabulous job of that. Unfortunately, the flip side is we have people suffering longer in that period of extended morbidity. So if it's not doctors' job to get us up on the green curve, whose job is it? Well, it's obviously our job. So it's well worth us understanding what's it going to take to get on that curve as early in life as we possibly can. And how is it that so many people have fallen into this trajectory? Well, as we look around, and those of us who study longevity, the answer is actually right in front of us. Tremendous confusion. We're inundated with information from all sources. We have lots of experts out there every day telling us it's one thing or it's another. And if you're familiar with the blind man and the elephant fable, this is a pretty good explanation of what's going on today. Lots of experts, well-intentioned, all believing that they are on track to the silver bullet. And unfortunately, very few step back and take a more holistic look and understand, well, there is no silver bullet. There's no silver bullet on the horizon. So what can we do today to help sort out the confusion? I love this quote. It comes from the largest study of centenarians ever conducted. It's called the New England Centenarian Study, done by Boston University and led by Dr. Tom Perls. And the takeaway they got from this study is I think, just great. The older you get, the healthier you've been. So what that really says is maintain wellness today, and that will just continue to accumulate over years. Just like we invested in our retirement funds every day for decades, we need to invest in our wellness every day if we're expecting to enjoy a long and healthy retirement. One of the first things I have to help my students unlearn is genetics. We grew up for years being told that it's all in the genes, and when I ask everybody, that's usually the first answer that comes out of their minds. Even if they've seen some of this data, it's still so deeply ingrained, and so unlearning things takes time. I understand that. So if we look at our modern exploration into genetics, it's really quite interesting, and it really wasn't until the 1990s when we started the Human Genome Project, which at the time we thought was going to give us the cure to cancer. Well, coming out of that 10-year study, we learned humans have about 22,000 genes. That may sound like a big number until you put it against the water flea on the tip of that guy's finger right there. It has over 30,000 genes. So quite a bit more, almost 50% more genes than we do. And as we went through that study, it opened up the door to the epigenome. And that's where all the fun started, because that's really where all the action is. And so we can think about our genes as a piano keyboard. Well, in reality, of course, a piano doesn't do anything on its own until someone gets up and starts playing the keys. And those keys are simply binary keys on and off, and our genes are binary as well. We have a number of switches that go on and off, and all those dictate all sorts of things around health. Moving forward over the last 10 years, the whole world around the epigenome has just exploded. And so remember, the epigenome is the switching of our genes. So we're now into things like CRISPR technology, gene snipping, stem cell therapy, and a few folks trying to work on modifying our genes to allow us to live to 1,000, if that's of interest. Not for me. So really the important takeaway here is understanding our epigenome is really, really important. And the good news is you and I have a lot of influence over our epigenome by all the little choices we make through the day. This is a good way to think about genetics versus epigenetics. Here's the example of twins. That's genetics at play. People who look like their pets, think epigenetics. Longevity is really all about balance, and that's how we get the advantage by leveraging balance, as opposed to being too focused on any one or two or even three areas. I see this all the time, and people want to focus just on one area that they think is really important to them, when in reality it's always at the expense of something else. So we really need to keep a balanced perspective. And in keeping a balanced perspective, what we start to do is, within the epigenome, while you don't need to understand what's going on here, but what the epigenome does, it keeps all of our DNA wrapped up nice and tightly. And in doing so, it protects us from our genetic dispositions. So we may have dispositions for certain types of cancer and dispositions for disease that we may think of as inherited. Provided those don't get exposed and they keep wrapped up nice and tight, then our likelihood of getting that disease is dramatically less. So that's really the power of managing our epigenome, is keeping any of our weaknesses, our dispositions, protected from the outside world and protected from the things that'll lead to disease. And in doing so, it'll limit the oxidative stress that we're exposed to, which accelerates aging, and it'll also, by nature, start to plug us into the bigger environment around us and understand how that bigger environment plays a big role in our health. Hopefully, even with that basic overview, you've got a sense of the opportunity for longevity is actually quite attainable, much more attainable than anyone had ever thought previously. And it's really the little things that we choose to do each day that add up over time. I think that most people could easily get 10 more healthy years, provided they started early enough, and that's really the key. By age 50 is when we really need to start making some quality choices and start to get better informed. In the coming months, you're going to see a number of videos come available through discussions with my colleagues, tips that we'll bring forward, all to try to start to build your foundational knowledge around longevity and get you on a path to wellness and get you up on that opportunity curve as soon as possible. So I'd encourage you to subscribe down below on the YouTube page and join us on Facebook if you'd like to be part of any of our groups there. Love to have you part of the discussion, more engaged in getting more of us up on that opportunity curve that we'd all like to be on. Until next time, have a healthy day.